Welcome to the Chicago Bears Podcast, a presentation of ESPN Chicago, Chicago's home for sports. Here's your host, Pat, the designer.
Bear down, Bears fans. Welcome into another edition of the Chicago Bears Podcast. I am here at Hallis Hall while nobody else is here. Courtney never told me that it's just like empty when there's not football things going on. I thought like it was bustling in here, but had a chance to meet with Poles and Flus and everybody today. So that's why we're here. Courtney's out in New York being a superstar. That's why she's killing it out here with the TV makeup, dominating. I just look like me. It is what it is. But all of that to say, ladies and gentlemen, football is back this Saturday, and we are now heading into practices that lead to a game. We got to talk about what we're seeing out of this offense and this wide receiver room as a whole. Saw them still go out there and cook a little bit at Family Fest, so we'll jump into that. And then, listen, there is football coming up, so we got to talk about what our expectations are for looking ahead at this team heading into the season. All that and more on today's episode of the Chicago Bears Podcast. Hit that like button, subscribe to the page. Courtney, how are you?
I'm good. It's weird that we're like role reversal right now. You're at the place where I typically am every day of the week, but it's 3 weeks into camp right now, finally gearing up towards the first preseason game. Curious to see if we get an answer on how long starters will actually play in this first game, if at all. Usually the first game is one that teams utilize their starting players very little, but we do know that last year Justin Fields and the first team offense got quite a bit of run throughout the preseason. I would imagine it's going to be the same going forward, but we're just not sure how much yet against Titans.
No, for sure. And I think we're excited mostly to see, right, what this offense is going to be and how that's going to, start to set itself up versus a defense that's not our own. But at a minimum, coming out of Family Fest, it sounds like the offense has continued to go out there and make plays. And like we talked about before the podcast, right, fight back a little bit. Remember, the defense basically was like, yeah, we were chirping at them and they were silent on the other side. We're trying to get that fire on both sides. What is your expectations right now when you're looking at how this offense is coming together, specifically that wide receiver room where the main person who's been fighting back and chirping back has been Chase Claypool?
Yeah, we saw that on Saturday. That was part of the team portion of practice where there were not one, but two scuffles, one of which involved Chase Claypool and Eddie Jackson. There was a separate one with the second team unit, but it's, Chase Claypool is the most vocal receiver that they have. That's somebody that I think Darnell Mooney had said, if there was, the energy guy, the bring the juice guy, it's probably going to be Chase Claypool, because Mooney was very self-aware that that's like he's not the rah-rah guy. Chase Claypool can be that guy. So matching the defense's energy has apparently been something the defense has been. They make it sound like this is like all a calculated attempt to bring the most out of the offense. And there probably is some truth to that, but I just think that's the natural personality of defenders, especially on DBs. They're going to get in your face. So what we saw last week where, the offense had their worst day of practice on Wednesday by far, and the defense kept chirping. When we talked to Eddie Jackson, he said it was his goal to poke the bear, meaning poke the offense, get them a little riled up, get under their skin. Of course, you want it to all stay on the field. You want it to not be something that, feels personal, and it doesn't. But, there was on Saturday when we saw Chase Claypool and Eddie Jackson get into it. So he catches, he's running a drag route, and he, gets kind of like a hard hit from Eddie Jackson.
Yeah.
And then those two get into it, and there's a helmet. I think it was Eddie Jackson's helmet comes off. There's a shoving match, and there's some stuff after the whistle, which Alan Williams, the defensive coordinator, said until they tell us to start practicing that because they're going to allow it in games, we're not going to do that. So I can understand, even Ryan Poles at one point had to step in after the first thing got broken up, and then those two were still talking, Jackson and Claypool. And Poles was, trying to diffuse the situation. You want guys fired up. You want people to take this stuff seriously. The old cliche, it's time to hit somebody else because, for 2.5, 3 weeks, you're hitting your own team. Definitely starting to see that play out. But I think the offense responded in a big way with that on Saturday, but also what we know from the practice at Soldier Field on Sunday, they had a great red zone period to end the day, and it was probably the most consistent day from the Bears offense, the first teamers, that has happened throughout camp. So it's a good sign that things are trending in the right direction. Now, this next step of being in pads, getting ready for that game Saturday against the Tennessee Titans. Now's your chance to kind of figure out a little bit more who they're looking at, because if starters don't play a whole bunch or at all during this first preseason game, now you're going to you're starting to get to see, okay, the Equanimous St. Brown's, Velus Jones, Tyler Scott taking advantage of those opportunities, and then the guys that are probably more than likely competing for practice squad spots when we're just specifically talking about the receiver room.
When you look at this receiver room right now, right, because I think that it's been vastly upgraded from what we came into last season. Everybody understands that. But I think even with how much it's been upgraded, maybe that's even been undersold at this point, because as we've seen these guys kind of start to, work together and start Mooney working his way back in, it feels like this could be a receiving core that if Justin Fields does pretty much what he said he plans to do this season, go out and be a 4,000-yard passer, we could be talking about as one of the best in the NFC alone, maybe a top 5, top 10 receiving core in the NFL as a whole. How far do you think this receiving core is going to jump up from last season?
Well, I mean, top 5 would be, I think, a stretch, because you have, let's think about the NFC alone, and San Francisco, the Philadelphia Eagles, Dallas. Those are immediately the upper echelon of receiver rooms in this conference. So, to put the Bears, maybe if this would be expectations have been met, everything is going according to plan, probably top 10 would not be, you want to be top 10. If you're not top 10, then you're taking a look at the other 16 teams in each division, in each conference.
It's Marvin Harrison Jr.
Next
season.
You know what I mean? If you're not top 10, then something isn't working out, because you traded effectively a first round pick for Chase Claypool. You traded the first round pick for DJ Moore. You've made a lot of investments in this room. And if this group doesn't, produce an offense that is averaging more than 131 yards a game in the passing game, then that's a problem. But, the potential's there, and the potential for them to have more defined roles, I think, is really important. Claypool is that big body guy who's not afraid to call for that action coming across the middle of the field. We've seen him on, some of those crossing routes, the drag route from Saturday, him being willing to use his physicality, use his size to his advantage to catch balls over the middle of the field. That's going to be a really pivotal role for him. But as DJ Moore and Justin Fields continue to put on display what we've seen every day in practice, and then eventually carry that over into games, what that's going to open up, or what the roles for the other receivers that you expect to be, on the field most often, Darnell Mooney, Chase Claypool, you're going to find a more defined role. I think with Mooney, I know he can win on the outside. I'm not concerned about that. He's better as a slot receiver in this offense, and that's where we see him used most often during training camp. And they don't have to toy with the idea of, well, because of deficiencies among the personnel, we have to play you as the X. Because of this, we got to play you as the Z. No, they're playing him where they need to play him, and that's typically in the slot, and that's fine. I mean, they're using him on some jet motion. We've seen a lot of different things in training camp. And I just feel you're going to see pretty considerable improvement from that group, specifically because everyone's going to have a role that they didn't have last year. That they just didn't have guys having defined roles. So that's probably my biggest takeaway from the receiver room through, almost 3 weeks now of training camp, where going into that first preseason game, how are they the guys further down the depth chart, how are they going to make a name for themselves or get themselves a bigger look for the second preseason game based on what they do this Saturday?
Yeah, it's going to be really focusing in on guys like Tyler Scott, Velus Jones. Those are names that have been, talked about all training camp. Both of those guys having a really good training camp to this point. So really excited to see what they're going to do Saturday. We do head into Saturday with the names on the injury report seeming to continue to mount up. A couple of more guys coming in, not playing during Family Fest on Sunday. are we getting to the point now where, not to say that we're concerned, right, but we're saying, okay, do we have the depth when things are coming this season? Because I don't think early on, one, they're not going to tell us anything right now, but two, if it were serious, we'd have that conversation. They'd probably come out and say something about it. I think these are just nagging little things where we don't see guys throughout the week or heading into training camp, or through into the first preseason game. But where's that concern level heading into the season on the depth of this team? Because again, now you're really quickly at guys where you're like, all right, well, that's not the lineup we thought we had.
And I mean, how teams treat injuries on today's August 7th is very different than what they would do during a regular season game. Now, we know the last couple days, but like specifically with the last practice that the Bears had on Sunday, again, a lot of the same guys being held out of practice. Tremaine Edmonds, that would be, I believe, his third practice that he was held out. Nate Davis has not practiced since last week. Jack Sanborn, after he got hurt, and the days are all blurring together, forgive me, but like there was a day during practice, I want to say it was last Monday or Tuesday, where he seemed to get hurt, walked off, it was a goal line situation. But again, like, there's some other names too. Jaquan Brisker in there, Dylan Cole, DeMarcus Walker has been on that list. But then seeing Lucas Patrick, go out of the Family Fest practice, apparently had a brief visit to the medical tent and then, went back to the locker room. Matt Eberflus's message is that none of these things are long-term right now. So that's good, but you're also not going to know truly like how serious these things are until, if we're talking about this at week 1, then it is a pretty, to any of the guys that I mentioned, that's a pretty significant amount of time between now and the week going into September 11th in the opener against the Green Bay Packers. But I think I think you do have to take the team at what they're saying at face value, that these are not long-term injuries, which then you don't have to panic too much about the depth. But it is not great when your offensive line has, already like one of your key backups dealing with something. Now, Lucas Patrick, if he goes back to practice this week, that's great. But even if they like want to hold him out for a little bit, that gets Jatari Carter some really good reps. And, there could be some other younger players who are probably headed towards the practice squad that you might view in that position. With what Ryan Poles said the other day when he was asked, hey, Nate Davis, Tevin Jenkins, this is before Jenkins went back to practice, are you worried about the depth that you have? And he said that before, that used to be something that, you kind of panic over, like, how's this going to work out? And it definitely sounds like some sugarcoating a little bit. Like, it's great because you get to see the depth that you get to see how your depth works out. You can look at that through two lenses. That's either, he's, selling the younger guys, whatever, because you don't really want your depth playing all that much. You want your starters playing. So you could see it through two ways. Like, man, it could be worse. And they're just, they're trying to be confident in the guys that they have, or that it truly is a chance to see guys that they expect to play at some point. Because we know injuries happen up front more often than they don't. But Jenkins being back is great. Nate Davis in this absence, I said it last week, I still think it's kind of concerning that this has happened now for a week where he's been out. And then Lucas Patrick going down, he's your best backup offensive lineman that you have if you're the Bears. So now you're like, okay, you're in scramble mode yet again. You can't afford that with this offensive line. We know how good an offensive line and a quarterback can be when he has protection that is together and like practicing together a lot. If it starts to get derailed, how do they recover? And are the backups? Is the Alex Leatherwood? Is Jatari Carter? If he ends up having to play, a little bit more time at right guard than maybe they were hoping, because that would mean Nate Davis, Lucas Patrick are not playing either. Like, how does he handle it? Because I mean, they like him. They drafted him in the late rounds in 2022. Like, he's been playing, quite a bit in training camp with the twos. It's quality depth. Like, I guess, use the time now to do whatever you can to develop that depth.
Yeah, it's I wasn't concerned until I heard Flus say, at this point now, you're missing out on important time for continuity.
That's huge.
That was the time where I was like, okay, so that means that now we're getting to the point where you're missing enough time that even the coaches are starting to get concerned with what the continuity of this team is going to be. So I don't know, like, I feel good about the depth of this team, but like I said, when you start to see names drop, when you see a Jack Sanborn drop, right, like, all of a sudden Noah Sewell stepping in. We thought, I mean, we said coming into the season, he's probably your fourth best linebacker. Dylan Cole goes down as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I feel like there's a lot of these positions where I feel like the frontline names are really good names, really good guys to have out there. But if they're not out there, you quickly start to look at this team and say, we're at a lot of the guys who were starters at the end of last season when this was all said and done.
Yeah, and that's, again, like they're probably being more cautious with things than like being anything that's like serious right now, needs surgery. Like you would know that stuff gets out. If somebody was on track for a season-ending injury or needing surgery that's going to keep him out for a while, we would know by now. Hell, the team even said that they would make a statement if it was a long-term injury.
Yeah.
We kind of make the joke, everybody's day-to-day in training camp, and that's what they like to say. But, some teams handle injuries very differently. The Rams, every time that Sean McVay's asked about that, he's very upfront about this guy's dealing with this, expect him back in a couple of days. The Bears are not like that. And that's Matt Eberflus's prerogative. That's cool. But when you are missing guys in numbers like this, in speaking to like what it could do this weekend, let's say they did want to play their starters some, because Matt Eberflus said that they would play starters in the preseason. It's not a complete hard fast, like not doing it. But that limits then probably what your plan would be for having, let's say, the starting offensive line together for 3 series, which I don't know how much continuity you can actually get when you're not playing all that much, but just follow me here on that example. Well, then that might lead you to, start mixing and matching and getting some other guys in, instead of saying, all right, well, if 2/3 or, 2/5 of the offensive line, the starters are out, like nobody's playing, like it might be, okay, well, Braxton Jones, Cody Whitehair, and then Darnell Wright, because that Darnell Wright's they're gonna want to get him some reps. So then you might be trying Alex Leatherwood at left guard and seeing if Jatari Carter can play for you at right guard, assuming the other two are not able to. So it's going to be a lot of mixing and matching. It just might be more than what the Bears had hoped for going into this first preseason game. But then again, they're trying to get a look at everybody. I know that sounds silly when these games don't mean anything, and especially when you're looking like way down the depth chart. But since injuries are such a big part of football, you have to be prepared in all scenarios, and not just like, that doesn't just help them. They're looking at 31 other teams and what they're doing in the preseason to see, hey, is that somebody that when cuts go around, we might want to bring him into the fold here because he could fill a depth role. Like there's a lot of that happens, more than just like what's going on with the Chicago Bears at this point of the season.
Yeah. I mean, I the one spot where we can feel a little bit better, Bears fans can all take a sigh of relief and breathe on. We finally went out and got that pass rusher that we were looking for, that edge rusher that we were looking for. We made that move on Friday, I believe he came in.
Officially it became,
Thursday was a signing.
So Thursday was when it came out. I think Friday was when they officially added him to the roster.
Yeah.
He will have his first practice on Tuesday. So like they signed him. He came in, to my understanding, like, did the signing and all that on Thursday, physical, all that, met with us on Friday. He went back home to kind of get his life together. Because remember, he hasn't been in a camp. It's not like, he got traded and it was one place, another. Like he's been, he hasn't been anywhere for the last 4 or 5 months, anywhere meaning a football environment. He's been on his own working out, but he hasn't been part of a team. So he's got to go figure out his life, like get like all of his like logistic stuff together, and then get back to Lake Forest for training camp. So sounds like he got his number 91. That's what he's listed at right now.
That. We saw Dominique Robinson
very
with the 90
curious
on.
to see what the price was, because if you're Unique Ngakoue and if you're Dominique Robinson, second-year player Dominique Robinson, who hasn't made your money yet, I would definitely drive up a bargain on that. Like if you want 91, you've got to pay, because Unique Ngakoue has had 91 at every stop he's played at. So I feel like I remember in Minnesota, somebody else wearing it, and he had one of those, one of the same sort of things where he ended up having to pony up to get 91. But anyways, it was a necessary move. We've talked about this forever. How many episodes have we done where we're debating, hey, are they going to sign a pass rusher yet? Are we still waiting? And I thought it was kind of funny that Ryan Poles even poked fun at the situation when he said, if Bears fans, if they're anything, they're passionate, because if he's not at his son's little league game and he's got coaches yelling at him from third base, hey, you going to sign a pass rusher? He's on a beach in Maui on a vacation where he's getting asked about it. So
Which, can we get time and place established here, by the way? If you're
yeah.
coaching third base, maybe don't yell back, hey, how about a pass rusher? But
you know
by the way,
fans,
bring them around.
Yeah, these fans. You're a fan. Like people get passionate, man. Like they love this stuff. And I get it. And that's what you sign up for as a general manager. But for him to get the top free agent pass rusher available, and at the deal in which he got, like, did you see the deal that Justin Houston got with Carolina?
Yeah.
Like, he got considerably less, somewhere around that $6-7 million range from Carolina versus what Yannick Ngakoue got, nearly all of that 1 year, $10.5 million contract guaranteed. Like, even though there was the idea that there's connection with the Colts and Eberflus and Justin Houston, knowing that scheme, and then of course with Ryan Poles, it really shows you what they believe the need here is on this defensive line. And that's, getting off the ball, off the edge, and getting to the quarterback. I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to figure that out, but I will say that he made the right move to do this now, because, it's more than just like, okay, like, he's a really good player, we want to get him in the fold. It's what you've seen in camp too that leads you to believe, hey, as much as we may like Dominique Robinson and Travis Gibson, we can't, like, it would be negligent to not try to fill that void somehow.
Have we heard anything on kind of what the situation was on why it took so long with Yannick Ngakoue? Just money as itself?
Yeah, it's contracts. I mean, this is somebody who wanted a multi-year deal.
Yeah.
You got to think about it too. He's 29 years old. He's probably sitting there like, damn, I'm putting up 8 sacks a year, minimum, every year of my 7-year career, yet I can't get a long-term deal anywhere. Now, there's reasons for that, of course. And as much as some coaches want to like push aside the notion that he's not great as a run defender because of a lot of missed tackles and stuff that actually shows up on tape, that I think is fair to acknowledge. But, if you're Yannick Ngakoue, you're thinking, okay, there's a lot of pass rushers who have less production than I do over the course of their career, yet they're signing the big Trey Hendrickson sort of deals. They're signing what Cam Jordan got. And of course, his last contract with the New Orleans Saints. I mean, I'm talking about like earlier in his prime, but he's probably sitting there thinking, okay, well, what more do I need to do to show it? Because I feel like Yannick Ngakoue has been on a prove it deal since 2020. Like ever since he had the franchise tag put on him by Jacksonville and then gets tagged and traded to Minnesota. That doesn't work out because the team stinks and they go like 1-5 to start, and they trade him after the first 6 weeks, and he goes to Baltimore. They don't keep him. Then he goes to Vegas. They don't keep him. Then he goes to the Colts. And now here, I don't blame him for holding out to the point where he at least got most of that deal guaranteed, because he has produced, especially in terms of sack numbers. And we know that, like interceptions, teams pay for sack numbers. They may say, oh, well, it doesn't tell the whole story. No, they want to see somebody with double-digit sacks. They want to see those sorts of statistical accolades next to somebody's name, because that defines how effective you are at doing one of the most important jobs that you can do as a defender, which is stopping the play in action by stopping the quarterback. So I think for him, he was trying to get the best. He wasn't going to jump at an opportunity unless it could potentially lead to A, more money, and B, a place where, let's say this goes according to the plan that the Bears have, that this could help their pass rushing for Yannick Ngakoue too. Let's hope he likes it, because then he may be part of what they want to build going forward. And next offseason could be looking at a more expensive deal for himself, but also the security in terms of years, because, 1 year there's not much security behind that. And if it doesn't go well, then he's on the move again next year.
And that's the question. You said the perfect word for it, right? A prove it deal. We've seen the talent. We know what the talent is. Is this prove it as far as a guy in the locker room? Prove it as far as a guy who can improve on run defense? What is he here on the prove it deal for? Because we know that he's going to get to the passer.
Mm-hmm. No, we do. And that has not been something. It really is remarkable how many places he's been. This is his fifth team since 2020. How many places he's been and how the production has not dipped really at all. And, for him, I think it's putting it all together in ways that we maybe haven't seen. The Bears have been pretty adamant that they're going to use him on first and second down. Like, he's not just
He's not a pass rush guy, just on passing plays. Yeah.
And I mean, is he a pass rush specialist? Do guys have areas of their skill set that are better than others? Absolutely. And you'd be foolish to think that he's like this well-rounded pass rusher when he's not, or well-rounded defender up front when he's not, because he hasn't played the run well. I know that there's some people out there who want to think that we're all crazy for pointing it out. Look at the tape. Look at some of the run fits. Look at some of the missed tackles, all of the things that have happened over the course of his career. And maybe in some schemes, he just wasn't utilized towards that because teams either decided against it or saw something that was a deficiency that they wanted to work around because they had better personnel to fit that. The defensive line is what you got right now. And it's been reworked. I mean, him, DeMarcus Walker, of course, the new additions up front, not just the two young rookies in Javon Dexter and Zach Pickens, but Andrew Billings has been kind of this quiet storyline throughout camp. I mean, the guy's massive. He's going to be playing a huge role as the nose on this defensive line to be able to stop the run kind of at the initial level so it doesn't get to the second level. The linebackers have to do their job. So I think that, it's quietly been one of the more active places they've been. It's just not until Yannick Ngakoue did it. If you're a Bears fan looking at this, would you say, okay, they feel good about where they are headed into the season now versus how they were before, because they had been looking all off season. Yeah. If they really didn't think that they needed an edge rusher, they would have shut down that conversation by their actions and inaction. But clearly, the fact that they decided to keep this thing out, keep this thing going and look for an edge rusher as strong as Yannick Ngakoue. I mean, he's a top free agent edge rusher, but that's a pretty big deal to get the top guy remaining and not just somebody that, is a bargain bin deal and somebody that, again, would be here on 1 year. You've got an upper echelon player that is here on a 1-year deal. Yeah, no,
100%. And when I look at how this Bears team, I have to applaud how Ryan Poles has put this all together, because Yannick Ngakoue coming in, to me, is the finishing piece of, okay, we have this guy that's consistently going to be able to get to the quarterback, but how do we insulate? Because I do think, right, with the Colts wouldn't put him out there a lot of times if there weren't passing downs for him to get there, because they had guys that could get to the quarterback. And by the end of the season, it was a nightmare over there in Indianapolis. So there's that aspect of it as well, right? But I feel like on a lot of teams where you watch him play, right, they would just say, okay, he's not a good run guy, we're going to get him out of here. With the Bears, it feels like they have enough good run guys. They have enough good linebacker help, enough safety help that can come up, that you're kind of almost able to insulate him in a way with this run defense that, I think the Bears, we felt better about what the Bears run defense was going to be coming into the season. Now you've got a guy who can cause that pressure coming off the edge. I think that Chicago might just be the perfect storm, if you will, of pieces that come together that can accentuate his game.
Yeah. And I mean, that's assuming all of the other pieces that you mentioned work within this defense. Yeah. Now, a lot of them are retained pieces. And for Yannick to be, he was with Rod Marinelli and Travis Smith in Vegas. Now, Marinelli and Eberflus go way back to their days in Denver. It's all a similar scheme. Gus Bradley and what they run in Indianapolis. There's a lot there. That's the reason that they were also pretty high on this fit, because they know if you're going to parachute somebody in, it's got to be and he's shown this. He's parachuted in places the last 3 years and has done a terrific job, more or less, every single season, adapting to a new locker room, new teammates, new coaches, and new scheme every year. So I think they're comfortable in that. They're not going to ask him to do everything. This is not going to move the needle in and people ask, what does this do in terms of wins for them? Does this really move it up that much more? I would say probably not, at least from my expectations, because I think this is a 7 or 8 win football team. I've said that on record. That is, I think, a very good mark of improvement and honestly how they would define success for this season. But does, the wins above replacement element, how many extra wins is a Yannick Ngakoue giving you? I'm not sure it can really be that much if you break it down that way. But, his presence there is going to raise the level for other guys. That I think is certainly, a big thing for the Trevis Gibsons and the Dominique Robinsons. And you're not going to get overmatched because for what we saw last year, they'd like to use a rotation on the defensive line. I very much envision at edge too, as much as Yannick Ngakoue is going to play a ton, there's going to be a good rotation in there to keep guys fresh and also to try to, keep teams guessing as well.
Yeah, and the number one thing that I said that this does for this defense as a whole is it allows the players that you brought in, the TJ Edwards, the Tremaine Edmonds, to still be those guys that they were in past cities, right? Yes, I think that Tremaine Edmonds could come in and be a dominant player no matter the situation that you put him in, but his life is made a lot easier when guys are getting to the quarterbacks, forcing the quarterback to make quicker decisions. The run isn't just hitting him in the face the second that the ball is snapped. All of those things to me make really big impacts on the pieces that you brought in. And then on top of that, right now, as much as I was high on guys like Rasheem Green or DeMarcus Walker, them being the number one, I'm not as high on. Now they're not the number one. They're not the ones that are getting every single
totally
double
fair.
team.
That's totally fair because you know that like Ngakoue is going to draw more attention to wherever he's lining up.
Yeah.
And that'll, teams are going to try to chip you. They're going to try to dedicate extra, an extra blocker in your direction. That's fine, but he's still able to be very disruptive. Like, don't get that wrong. Like other defensive lines he's been on, he has been the guy. I mean, you go back to you go back to Vegas. I mean, that's a defense that had like Chandler Jones and him. And I mean, he still was able to get, have a really good season there. Minnesota, he was the guy. I mean, he finished. I remember that 2020 season when I covered them. He finished with 6 sacks that year. That was what he was. By the time he left, like he left in week 6, and by the time the season was over, he was still the sack leader. Like that's not, that shows his impact, but it also shows that if you have a team where you've got other guys that are in the process of being developed, and DeMarcus Walker, a formidable presence coming off a 7-sack season of his own last year, you're not then just like I don't know if it would work if Yannick Ngakoue went to a place where it'd be like he is the only pass rushing presence that you can rely on.
Yeah.
I think that they really do think they have something reliable, inside-outside flexibility too, with DeMarcus Walker. But then again, Dominique Robinson, let's see it. Let's see what the offseason work with Robert Mathis. How does that manifest itself in the form of being a better pass rusher? Let's see too. With some of the interior guys, like if they are so high on trying to keep the quarterback high in the pocket, indent the pocket, that's the phrase they like to throw around. Let's see your interior pass rush. Like, let's see Justin Jones be the 3 technique that can, do what Aaron Donald does. Now, of course, I'm just throwing out like the cream of the crop, the prime example, but like, if that's the type of pass rush you want to have, because I still think they're built from the inside out, then that's got to be where a lot of the production is also coming from.
No, 100%. And that's how I think that's such a good – we've seen so many teams, right, where it's like you'll see them just go out and get the big name or the exciting name, right? And that's where the Yannick Ngakoues will pop up. But so much of this pressure on this defense is supposed to be from that middle, from that nose tackle position. I like that Ryan Poles had such a focus on finding that and still getting the edge, right? Like he said, Bears fans were reminding them left and right that, hey, bud, you got to get an edge. Third base, he's safe. Hey, Ryan, could you grab us an edge rusher when you get some free time?
He's a better man than I would be as a person. Like if you were in that role, being able to tune out the noise and then continue to do your job, as annoyed as I'm sure he probably gets. He probably won't show it, but I'm sure. Like, do people think he doesn't know that? Like, obviously, he's a scout. He's an evaluator. He knows what this team needs and what it lacks. And very clearly, it tells you how they felt about their pass rush, that they were like adamant that they had to get this done. My
favorite thing about seeing stuff like this, though, is when the GM makes the move that like everybody feels needed to be made. It's just like, see, I told y'all I knew what I was talking about. And it's like, all right, bud, like, okay, thanks for stating the obvious with that as well. Like, yes, we all wanted the edge rusher. Heading into this Saturday's game, what's your real expectation of what we're going to see, right? Like, starters, maybe a series here and there, but what are you really focusing in on, looking for coming out of this preseason?
I made this point today on First Take, and I know some people aren't going to agree with me. I cannot stand when the first team offense plays like 2 to 3 series together. I think everybody in the preseason, all starting members of the offense, quarterbacks and wide receivers, whatever. Give me 1 quarter. Give me 1 quarter, because you really can't judge how anybody is after 2 to 3 series. Give me a full quarter. Just give me 15 minutes. Let me see it. But I would doubt for this first preseason game that you do see a lot of Justin Fields in the first team offense because they're, as much as they are another year in this, then they do need work in the preseason and they will get reps in the preseason. The first game is kind of the easing in process. So I'd imagine you're going to see a lot of, Terrell Smith and Tyreek Stevenson on the back end of the defense, meaning probably no Eddie Jackson, probably no Jaquan Brisker and Jalen Johnson. You're going to get a chance to see your depth in the defensive backfield. So if that's a chance to evaluate who could be your CB2, that's probably going to be the biggest takeaway that we have. Of course, punt return will be a big one. Yeah. Bayless Jones, Tyler Scott, and Tyler Scott's practice on Saturday, he had a couple drops. So I'm sure he's going to want to try to right the wrongs there and, get himself in a better position. He's making the team. I have no doubt about that. He's had a really good camp, but just try to clean up some of the things that he did that he probably wasn't happy with himself offensively with on Saturday. But backup quarterback will be really interesting with PJ Walker because he has not looked good during camp. And that's putting it kind of lightly. I have not walked away from a single training camp practice and thought, okay, this is a viable backup for Justin Fields if he were to have to miss a game. And so
did they bring somebody in though? Because Peterman ain't there.
No,
either.
It was interesting. There was a period on Saturday, and maybe I'm not sure what this had to do with anything, but second team offense is PJ Walker's, yet there was a couple reps that Tyson Bagent was taking with the second team offense. Something to keep an eye on. Let's see what happens, what his reps, I would imagine his reps would be considerable. He's a rookie. Yeah. Nathan Peterman, Nathan Peterman's been in the league longer than I think any of the quarterbacks that they have. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a good bit of Tyson Bagent out there, but also, they're going to mix in personnel, young rookies that you expect to start. I bet we'll see Darnell Wright out there, which means we should probably end up seeing the first team offense out there, at least for a little bit. But then again, if there's injuries, is that really your first team offense? So the first game is always a crapshoot just in terms of the personnel that you see out there and that in which you don't. But come the second preseason game against Indianapolis, that's when I really think we're going to see starters, maybe for a quarter, maybe even for the first half. That would be that'd be my guess.
Yeah, it's all fun and games until somebody comes up limping, playing 15 minutes in the first quarter in the first preseason game. There, Courtney. I don't know. I just want
to see one quarter.
I'd have debated you on first.
I just think that you need one quarter because the argument came up about Dak and how Mike McCarthy said probably he's if I was a betting man, which I'm not, I'd probably bet against it playing. You got to think about it. Their offense last year and where they finished. They're 12-5 team that has a lot of changes. So what does that change look with Brandon Cooks in the mix? What does that change look with a new with a new tight end? I think you kind of just give me one quarter. One quarter is not the end of the world. We're not asking you to play every single rep or do multiple preseason. Aaron Rodgers was toying around with the idea of wanting to play a little bit in the preseason. Now, whether that's just posturing or whether he actually wants to do that, we'll see. But I don't think I cannot get behind what was it in Seattle last year where you see the first team offense go down the field. One drive. What does that accomplish outside of we had one good drive?
Y'all played football today, boys.
You're going against twos and maybe even some backups beyond that. I can't get behind that because I just don't think you actually walk away with anything beyond, a couple notes here and there. Okay, yeah, they are show you can do it again. Show some consistency.
Yeah. No, 100%. And not that you can just follow the script, right? Mitch looked great with the script.
Then go off the script. This offense looked great when they were on the script last year and then they went off of it.
Yeah, it's definitely different. It's just that's one of those situations where it's great all until the one time where it's not great. And then it's you let your guys play more than one drive. Thanks. But I feel like you can say that about any moment in preseason, so we'll see, man. I'm the one thing that I'm looking forward to and I'm kind of excited to see is, okay, where's Javon Dexter at as far as going from a two-gap system to penetration? How is he going to look with that? Because he's looked okay in camp. He hasn't looked bad.
He's got some work to do. Even the coaches have said that in terms of it is a different role for him, but it should be a better role for him in order to get after the quarterback. He's just kind of been slow on his get off. And I know that's something that Matt Eberflus and Alan Williams have talked about, really trying to hone in on it with him. So let's see. I would imagine we'll see quite a bit of him and Zach Pickens in this preseason game and see how they fare, against and with backup competition.
No, 100%. And that's the thing that I'm looking for, right? Just to see, because this is a system that it's not like it's new to him. He thrived in it. He was ahead of, why can't I think of a boy that went to Philly now that everybody wanted us to draft?
Jalen Carter.
Jalen Carter. I was thinking Hurts the entire time. He was ahead of Jalen Carter coming out of high school playing that style. He was ahead of Jalen Carter first year at Florida playing that style, and then everything switched. So it'd be good to see kind of how he's going to be able to get back to his game, and if he's going to be able to thrive here early on, because I think there's a lot of expectation. We don't talk about them as much, right? Because they're not the 10th or 11th overall pick, but there's still a lot of expectation on Javon Dexter, Zach Pickens coming in. He's talking about he wants to be a legend. So that's what I'm looking forward to. Hoping to see in this first preseason game. Give me 3 sacks right off the bat. That's all I'm looking at. I'm high, lofty goals. It is what it is. Hey, we appreciate you.
Real football.
Just that's all I want. My God.
Man, we're getting there. I'm
so and now that's the tough part, right? Saturday is just like, I remember watching preseason and being like, man, if they just let Justin Fields start every game, we might be able to win 7 games. We did not. But, hey, we appreciate you guys for tuning in and showing love to another episode of the Chicago Bears podcast. We'll be here keeping you guys informed on everything happening. We'll be at Hallis 3 days this week, I believe. 2 or 3 days, so we'll be able to kind of look in on practice and see what things are looking like, man. So we'll bring you guys all that information. For Courtney Cronin, I am Pat the Designer, back at it again. Appreciate you guys for showing love. Y'all stay safe out there, Chicago. Bear down. Peace.